stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A couple quick announcements. Well, I guess the first announcement is Christina contacted me. She's going to be about 15 minutes late, so we'll be here in about 12 minutes. First announcement is acceptance of a donation from the Rivertowns Lions Club. This is the, I don't know, maybe 10th year in a row, but at least 5th year in a row that they've donated $500 to the Irvington Police Department as part of their annual dinner that honors the Police Officers of the Year from the Rivertowns. In the past, the money's been used for the DARE program or other activities like that. We also have another donation, which was $1,000. Just the donation, just the announcements. I didn't think you wanted to stick around.
What 119 back to my office is a parking lot.
Oh, wow.
A parking lot.
Even though the bridge is still
I think there's
okay
one lane
now.
down. I don't know. So it was a disaster getting all safe for me too. Henry and Barbara Cohen of 21 Matheson Park donated $1,000 towards the fireworks display, so thank you for that.
Did they donate before or after the display?
Before. So they didn't say it anymore once they saw it, so that's a good sign or bad sign. But also the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission has decided to honor Chris DiPaoli for his heroic actions with the stabbing down at the train station. So that's a very cool accommodation he's receiving. It's an annual national prize, so congratulations, Chris, again.
Yes, that's quite
Quite
impressive.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then additionally impressive was both police officers James Egloff and Ryan Weiss were both nominated by the chief for the New York State Police Officer of the Year, and although they weren't selected to be the Police Officer of the Year, they will be recognized for their actions with a Governor's Certificate of Exceptional Valor for the same incident. So congratulations to all involved once again.
There's one thing missing that's really of critical importance. Pokemon Park.
That's E right here.
Pokemon.
Pokemon tonight in the park. Pokemon Go, the Irvington PBA, the Irvington Fire Company, and the Irvington Rec Department are working together to allow children, and I guess adults as well, since it's ageless apparently, they're keeping the park open, Scenic Hudson Park, from 10 p.m. to midnight. So if you want to go try to find some rare Pokemon, have at it. That's 10 o'clock tonight.
Surely
That's
will be
Scenic
done
Hudson.
here, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
supposed to
exactly.
Stay up late.
Yeah, and we have to be done by 10 so we can have the down for Pokemon. And lastly, an important announcement, unrelated to Pokemon, is that Greenberg has adopted the phase-in for the reassessments. We will be sending out additional details. We got to watch the bill will come along in the state. We got to watch that whole process, and then came back to
Everybody,
Greenberg.
or just if the increase is over a certain amount?
Over
Yes.
25% of the assessment is increased by 25%. But we'll be sending out the details in an email blast. So it's not going to be that complicated, but we figured we'll finalize everything and send it out in a nice, succinct way. I think it was passed yesterday or 2 days ago, Monday? Yesterday. So hot off the press. If you were looking for the phase-in, it's happened. We have some correspondence. Some of it was regarding the public hearings we're having later. So I've actually moved those pieces of correspondence down to the appropriate public hearing section. With the non-public hearing related correspondence, first is from Jan Blair. She writes that the chairperson of the Open Space Committee. She had a conversation with Ed Marin, the building inspector, recently regarding the maps that are available to the building department. The open space that was created by the village is very helpful in identifying the specific parcels in the village. Some of the parcels that are parkland are identified on paper as vacant, residential, and recreation. The committee would like to request that the names of the specific areas are formally included in all documentation declared as parkland. In addition, a few other parcels that need to be updated and identified. She's working with Ed and Larry to revise the map information. The Woods Committee has expressed concern that the woods have not been officially dedicated as parkland. In addition, there's concern that the woods has not been designated as being used as parkland. I realize it's not necessary to have a formal declaration, but a simple resolution from the Board of Trustees is all that is necessary. I think Mary Ann, if you just want to, take a look at that and, come back with your thoughts at a future meeting, that'd be great. This one, I'm going to assign to Mark because I think this would be good for him. Miss Lorraine Landy would like to know why the village doesn't have pretty hanging baskets. She thought we were in an affluent city, and look how good Tarrytown looks. So, I would say our beautification committee does a lot of great work on Main Street. I'm guessing we don't have appropriate receptacles for hanging baskets, but that may or may not be the case. But we appreciate the suggestion, and I'm sure the beautification committee would be happy to consider that request.
Focus, I'm no longer involved with it, but one of the first committees I was involved in Irvington was the beautification committee way back. And their focus is on the planters and boxes, window boxes, and the displays at the top of Main Street and like that.
Right.
I know there's been a discussion, but I think that the problem is what do you hang them on?
Yeah.
I'd also think the Chamber of Commerce in Tarrytown does a lot of that.
Which is, it's nice we just kicked off our,
Yes, exactly.
restarted our chamber, so maybe
Right.
they will consider it as well. The last piece of correspondence in this section is from Mr. Paul Feiner. He writes to us that last fall while bicycling the South County Trail, he took photos of graffiti on his bike on the bike path. He also took photos of graffiti at other locations along the Bronx River Parkway bike path. He suggested that a Graffiti Busters initiative be organized with volunteers helping to remove graffiti from our parks and along bike paths. He's pleased to advise that Westchester Parks Foundation is now in the process of organizing a Graffiti Busters program. They will supply the paint and graffiti removal materials. The volunteers remove the graffiti and advise the foundation of the work they did. If you're interested in volunteering or know anyone who might, please contact Sarah Kavanaugh, the volunteer coordinator for foundations at 231-4530, 231-4530, or you can contact Larry and he'll get you in contact with the right people.
So there's probably one other letter that came in from Kathy Kaufman about the North Dutcher Street
Oh, yes.
landscaping, or that area, kind of the no man's land. So I just thought we should acknowledge we got that letter, and then
And we're working on the response.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a fairly complicated, it's not an easy, to get rid of the tree and then, then what do you do, that kind of thing, so. Yes, we did receive a letter from Kathy Kaufman, so. I think we should maybe share our thoughts internally on that. Any public comment not related to any of the public hearings? All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. We did have some changes to the rates paid for part-time seasonal employees in the Recreation and Parks Department and part-time seasonal employees as well, Larry, both of those, right?
Yeah, there's one on,
6C and D.
yeah, one on 6C and one on 16.
There are
I'm sorry, three on 16.
not a lot of big changes, but I will highlight them so we can know. Martin Marati went from $7.25 an hour to $7.75 an hour. That's part of the day camp.
That's the first, that's
That's-
resolution 6C, right?
And then there's returning day camp staff. Anish Sharwal went from $8 down to $7.75. And Lindsay Wasserman went from $8.25 to $8.75. And Andrew Lux went from $8 to $8.75 an hour. So those were the changes. They're pretty minor, but I just wanted to point them out since they were different from what's in your packet.
Right, and then I had two pretty, I hope, minor questions.
Okay.
I was not clear on the out-of-town travel for police chief. The resolution states it's being paid by IAS, but the background emails seem to indicate otherwise, so I'm not sure if I understood that. If
It's all being paid by IS.
So even though they're saying submit your normal invoices, it comes out of a fund that's managed by,
That's the Drug-Free Communities grant.
okay,
that
I just,
funds IS, right?
yeah, thank you, I just
Yeah,
didn't
it's
know how
not,
that.
it's not the village budget.
Yeah, and then the other one was the closeout of certain capital budget projects. I just was confused because in one of them that were, if you look at it, there's a negative number and something being added back into. I was wondering why that showed up there rather than on the list following. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
There's no significance, it's still a negative number.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brenda's not feeling well, so.
She shouldn't have a cold or something, or food, huh?
Not really sure.
We don't know.
Yeah,
Voodoo.
just, she never misses work, so hopefully she's feeling better soon.
I had a question on the camp stipend, which we may not be able to answer among ourselves, but there is one person who is, the rate is a $6,000 stipend, and I'm just wondering how that works. It's not the only one that's on an hourly rate.
Right. They are paid for all of the preparation work. I think it's probably the camp director. They're paid for all of the preparation work to get ready for camp, starting from, probably back in the winter.
So this is for the entire work that started months ago, and it's not broken down by hours? Okay, thank you.
So if everyone's comfortable with the consent agenda, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I will make a motion to open a public hearing to consider local law amending the village code to add a chapter on appearance tickets. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Christina should be here in a minute, so. Yeah, Larry, I don't know if you maybe wanted to kind of give the history of why we're talking about this.
Excuse me, if you want to wait for Christina, maybe do you want to do the correspondence related to this first?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. I'll stall for time.
And here she comes.
Ah,
Didn't have to stall very long. Don't worry. Perfect timing. We just have to do public hearing.
We gave you all this.
Yes, exactly. We signed everything to you.
Wait till you see your homework.
So Larry, I don't know if you want to give a little background on that.
Started.
We haven't opened the public hearing.
We did.
We did.
You voted on that.
Yes.
I think it was seconded by Janice.
Yes.
And it was 4-0 at the time. Would you like to also vote to open the
Yes.
public hearing? 5-0, Larry. Unanimous.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, what this law would do would authorize village administrator, superintendent of public works, or his designee, water and sewer superintendent, fire inspector, the superintendent of parks and rec, and his designee, and the village treasurer to issue appearance tickets for violations of village laws. Under existing laws, only police officers and the building inspector and his assistants can issue tickets for violations of village law. If it's a, garbage violation, it's the police department we have to issue. And the concern was that there are instances where it doesn't make sense to use police department resources to investigate and issue tickets for activities that are traffic violations or criminal in nature, like not clearing your sidewalks after a storm or letting dogs run loose in parks, or not following the village regs and putting trash out, whatever. And this law would allow village officials to issue appearance tickets in the areas they're responsible for. I don't know where you want to.
Yep, I think the examples we used were sidewalk permits for Brenda, maybe someone from the rec department for dogs off the leash, that seems to continue to be a problem. And by the time the police arrive, the person is usually gone, that sort of thing. I think that the way it's drafted now is rather straightforward. I think the comments that we kind of shared offline and some of the comments we've received from the public question the broad nature of it.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I actually
Yeah.
did think a couple of ways to narrow it if the board wanted to go in that direction. There's two ways you could do it. One, you could do is in Terrytown. What Terrytown does is it would say that these people would have the authority if the board of trustees authorizes them by resolution. So there would be this law, and then by resolution you could say, say that the superintendent of Parks and Rec can give tickets for, littering in the parks, or, whatever, or anything within it. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be just to, I think the language could be narrowed some. And I had some suggested language. And do you have the drafts in front of you?
Yeah, we have, I do.
Yes.
That in 1-10, starting with the third line, you might say the following, right now it says persons are hereby authorized. And just say following employees, because somebody had expressed a concern that the designee of one of these people could be a non-employee, And so I think by saying they have to be employees, it obviates that issue. And then they're hereby authorized and empowered to issue and serve appearance tickets. And you could narrow it to provide, and we talked a little bit about this, for violations of laws within their area of responsibility, or what, I'm fooling around trying to think of what term would work, so that the water and superintendent, if he's walking through the park and sees somebody running, the dog running loose, he can't issue a ticket. So it would be within their areas of, I'd like to say jurisdiction, but I don't think jurisdiction is laid out anywhere in the statute. So it'd be something like, within their area of responsibility. I think the thinking was that nobody's going to do it outside their area of responsibility. It would, the village would see to that, village administration. But it obviously makes people uncomfortable. So I think that language serves that limiting purpose, and I think that'd be a good idea there. And then also in the next sentence, applicability, following laws may be forced by the issuance of appearance tickets on New York State, Westchester County, and their village Burlington laws, including. I would take that language out. It was in there before because it used to list the building inspector, and the building inspector does enforce state law as well. So it could just say the following laws may be forced by the issuance of appearance tickets. And then A would be the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code. That needs to be there for the fire inspector. And the code of the Village of Arlington, except not the vehicles and traffic chapter. And then that eliminates, what was another concern, we don't, they ever would, but you know what, Larry, giving tickets for, underage drinking and stuff like that. I don't think that's in our code, maybe it's in our code, but something that's in our code. I think that addresses a lot of the concerns that were raised,
To me, I kind of like the Tarrytown model, where it would almost be, we could authorize those titles, but it would have to be, almost specific codes that we. So if like Joe Archino said, I'm having a problem with litter in the parks, and I'd like to empower, my foreman to issue tickets to people that litter, we would say, we'll consider this, and then he could cite, per village code and give the exact code, and then we could approve, the person and the code could do it. Almost like it wouldn't have to be necessarily in here, but it could be it could reference.
Well, you could do it by resolution, I would think, Brian. If you're saying you're going to put it in the code, then every time you do it, you have to amend the code.
I think we'd have to put it.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah, but I think we should have it clear somewhere what they can and can't enforce. Like keep it on the website or something that, assuming that they had something that they requested and we approved by resolution, that they would know what they could or couldn't be writing appearance tickets for. If that makes sense.
One thing, Brian, is I like that idea. You either have to be, enumerated explicitly, or you add them as needed. But I think you almost have to have an explicit list at the beginning. There are areas right now that we know, so maybe we do need a kind of an initial resolution that says, we know that DPW will be enforcing trash and snow violations, whatever. So just get some of those really well-known ones out of the way and assign to specific folks. I think that could do a lot to address the public comment we've gotten, which hasn't been read yet, but a lot of people are just, concerned about spreading authority, I guess.
It's a way to do it, but let me just tell you that the one issue I have with doing it that way
Via resolution.
by resolution is it's not always easy to find these resolutions. You know, it's like if it's in the code, it's in the code. The resolution, let's say, you know, in 15 years, somebody says, what's this parks employee doing it? Oh, we had a resolution on that.
You know,
Am I right? They're not gonna be so easy to find.
Well,
And we've seen, I'll tell you.
I do think along the lines of what Mark's saying, if we identify, 6 or 7 specific things now that we're already aware of, and was kind of our motivation for doing this, then maybe there would only be a handful in the next 10 years anyway, and you could go through the trouble of actually amending the code, and it wouldn't be that big a deal. I don't anticipate every 2 months an employee coming and saying, there's another statute, or something else we'd like to start enforcing. So maybe it is okay to keep it in the code and make it.
So you're
very clear.
suggesting that you would say in the code that the superintendent of public works can issue tickets for
The specific,
not removing snow?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
make some specific chapter references.
Yes.
Right, I think you would probably do a little bit of both to make it easy to follow as a lay reader.
That's fine, but somebody's
Yeah.
gonna have to tell me,
which ones we want, absolutely, that would come from us.
Yeah,
So,
but
Brian, I was
agree-
just going to
agree with
suggest
him.
one thing is, if we go this route, maybe what Larry could do is reach out to each department head and say, which violations do you feel are appropriate for you to handle? And, the list can be generated by the managers themselves, and then we can look at them, rather than us trying to second guess what the list is.
So then you're suggesting it not be resolution, it be in the code?
Yeah, that's right.
You're gonna make a change, I think it should be in the code rather than by resolution.
Yeah, and I completely agree with this approach that we really need to be very limited and very specific about who can issue summonses for what, because this is under the state criminal code, and it says in here, issue a summons to criminal court, and that's, I think,
Well,
what
no,
people to be.
that's what the local court is like, no, but it's only for violations of village code.
So we need to make it that very clear. I think that will reassure people a lot, that we're not,
I think one other thing we'd have to do is have some kind of, however limited it could be, but some kind of actual training for someone that knows, A, how to fill it out properly, and B, how to deal with the public when you're doing something like this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
Because it's, if you're used to, really keeping parks clean, and all of a sudden now you're gonna be, kind of a quasi enforcement officer, there should be some kind of training or something before we enforce something like this.
I don't know if right now, whether the appearance tickets that the police use or that Ed uses would work for everything else. Because that's what's really important, that the appearance ticket, you have all the information.
Yes.
Because you go to all that trouble and then you go in court and then
It's
it's
tough.
a defective form,
Yeah.
So, one question I have is, for instance, when there's a violation given out due to trash of some sort, or leaves or whatever, let's pick something that's DPW related, what form do they use?
Well, that's what I'm saying, it's gonna have to be the same form. Right now, it's only the police can do it, right? So it would be
They ask the police to go and issue the, is that what happens?
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's what I'm just kind of, yeah.
I mean,
Well, they
they put a sticker on
practically
them.
speaking, they
But that's not a
And they-
violation.
they go for
Correct.
warnings first,
Yeah.
which is not related to any of this. They try to get the behavior to change. But beyond that, there is no procedure other than the police right now.
So the other area, just taking this conversation one step further, is, it's kind of open-ended, and his or her designees. So what are we expecting there? Just, can we talk about that for a couple of minutes? Because I'm really happy with the superintendent of water and sewer being able to do something. That makes sense. But I'm wondering,
Well, I think the context that we were thinking of there was that, let's take enforcement of the leash law for dogs. I could see the Parks Department and you as a board hiring a part-time park ranger at some point. I'm not saying that's happening tomorrow, but that's the idea. That individual would not be the superintendent of Parks and Recreation. It would be a separately employed person who would take direction and would be his designee. So that's the,
and the other thing I was thinking is, tree violations, right? I mean, it's a similar nature, but the thing about,
Another good example is the sanitation department. It might be that the sanitation worker sees that they're,
or supervisor or something, right?
yeah.
right.
But not the superintendents.
No, but not the superintendent, right.
So I guess the only concern I have is the way it's written, it's like, it's not clear who approves the designee. You know, the way it looks like it's written, seems like it might be approved by the superintendent on their own.
I think that's the intention.
Or is it something that we actually, because if we have now a training requirement, you know, and stuff like that, do we really want to know who's doing this stuff? Should they come before us and say, we want you to add someone on this list? I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree that I like to maintain control of it, and I think, again, I don't think there's going to be that many. You know, if we create a park ranger position or something, we could have that added to the code as a specific title, and we could probably add. I mean, it might make sense to add the foreman or something like that, rather than just adding it as a generic designee. I think it tightens it up.
So just take out the
designee.
designee, just
Correct.
take it out.
And we would just list, you know, it might say superintendent of public works, might say foreman, you know, general foreman or something like that. You could figure out all the exact titles.
Right. Because for the dogs off leash, you might need to, absent hiring somebody else, we might need 2 or 3 people besides Joe who can do these tickets, but we should know who they are.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Janice, I didn't hear you.
I'm thinking about the dogs off leash, which is you know, I can think of that being one of the things that would happen most often. It can't just be Joe, and there might be 2 or 3 people on his staff that he would designate, but we should know who those people are, and they should go through the training and have it.
And how are you suggesting that be in the code?
I think we would. If we created a park ranger, for lack of a better term, position, we would add it. We'd probably define it and add it to the.
Right. So I think what Brian's saying is that you would,
You would
let's
list-
say, you'd amend the code to add a different
Correct.
position.
But are we saying we can still have designees by the department heads or no?
No,
No.
I'm saying no designees. I was thinking we might want to think about who we want to add, if we want to have the general foreman or, you know, somebody else like that.
So add
that would be
titles.
part of the review, besides them saying which kinds of appearance tickets they want to, they think they should be responsible. If they think they need someone like the foreman or supervisor of sanitation, whatever, then they could propose that person be put into the list.
The title, not the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the title.
So I'm definitely interested in hearing what the public has to say. I've been thinking about this for a while, but, and I've been reading the correspondence, and I think you're all reflecting that concern about the broadness. I have a question about how much police time is taken up by any of these things that we're wishing to solve by having this at all. You know, is this a significant burden on the police? Or is it a fairly, you know, uncommon burden on the police? How much police time is taken up by these things?
Or are these issues that require time and the police are not able to give the time, which is slightly different?
Could I just say one other thing and throw in? It's also a matter of expertise, however. It's like, are the police properly trained in certain areas to be able to enforce, you know, more technical aspects of a particular piece of code?
Yeah, I guess I would be looking at let's take trees, for instance. If there was a recommendation by the tree commission and that this has been violated, they wouldn't have to be the experts, but it would come to a point where the tree commission would have to say, this has been violated, now the police need to go and do this. That's more the way I was kind of perceiving it.
Which is sort of the way it is now.
Yeah, so then it's back to my same question, which is something about how much time are the police occupied in doing these kinds of things, and if we don't feel comfortable having someone other than the police do it, how much additional police time would we really need? You could say we need another, you know, X number of hours from a police officer. I don't know.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
goes
I'll tell you
to,
where it came from.
Yeah,
So the conversation started when there were basically 2 topics discussed by the Board of Trustees in recent months. One topic was the notion that there needs to be stepped up enforcement, no tolerance for dogs off leashes. keep all having that conversation. At the same time, we were talking with the traffic committee, who has been requesting, and the board acknowledging that the police need to be doing traffic on a much more frequent basis, traffic enforcement. So from our standpoint, as a staff, we looked at it and said that any time that the police are devoting to addressing dogs off leash, for example, they're not doing traffic control. So we looked at it, of course, we can't delegate traffic control to citizens, to other employees, so we felt that there was ways to still address those types of quality of life items like dogs. And so that's really where it started. Now, obviously it became broad and that you're being responsive to that, to the concerns of that, but that's really where it came from. So there's not an answer of saying, well, we currently spend 5 hours a week looking for dogs off leash. It's probably 0 or very little. You know what I mean? And some of the other areas as well. So it just gave us, we were looking for the flexibility to be able to address those things that the board would like to see enforced from time to time over the years, over the course of a year, like leaves in the fall and garbage at other times and dogs at other times. So it would give us some flexibility in there. That's where it came from. So that is a straight answer to exactly your question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think something like a part-time park ranger or part-time tree warden is going to be significantly less expensive in terms of budgetary impact than additional hours of police overtime or whatever.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, that's sort of part of the impetus as well, to try to manage the cost better.
Right.
And also just literally, if you're talking, let's keep with the dogs off leash, unless you're there when the dog is in the park, by the time you have to call the police to come and stop what they're doing, to come to the park to see if the dog is still there, it seems like a complete waste of time. If there's somebody who's in the Parks Department who can do this, that would probably be also much more effective in getting dogs on leash.
We thought so.
And I'm generally in support of the idea because of its justification as it's tied to cost savings and improved quality of life in terms of the work that the police do. I definitely do share in some of the correspondence we've received. I definitely do share, and you guys have mentioned it too, the concerns related to the broadness of it. So I think if we can limit it and make it super specific, we can also achieve those cost savings.
So maybe quickly read some of the correspondence and then
Cool. You know, I think you touched on a lot of the points.
Yep.
Just mention who it is that's
Sure.
written in. I think that's.
It's Kristen Wall. The board should not pass proposed amendment to the village code and add a chapter on appearance tickets because that's been, let's see, she wanted more data on how many appearance tickets are issued monthly. I mean, I think part of that again is something like the amount of people who have gotten tickets for dogs off leash are probably 0 because although it's been called in numerous times, the people are always gone. We just had a very scary incident once again in the parks up in the woods with the day camp where there were 7 dogs off leash, most of them large. They rushed the kids. Luckily, no one was bitten, but people had to chase the dogs away, and the dogs ran off. And they saw the dog walker, and they said, "Hey, you can't have dogs off leash." And they called the police. The police got there, and she was gone. So, and it's happened again and again. The police have gone up. They just haven't been there at the right time. So I think that's the kind of thing. So the amount of appearance tickets issued monthly. Right now, it's the police are doing it, so it's and appearance tickets is also a broad category. It's not for sidewalk violations. It's under the New York criminal procedural law. There's a lot of things that are covered, so there's probably a lot. But the board was advised that this list of authorized employees to issue periods is typical, and municipal peers do not authorize administrators, clerks, or treasurers. Reference park and rec superintendents. Some municipalities have animal control and parking enforcement. We're authorized to issue those. Irvington should authorize the superintendent of DPW and our fire inspector, nobody else. Our police should police the parks and no one else. That's Chris's. Beth Proper. At this time, Irvington only our local police are permitted to serve citizens and with desk appearance tickets. The proposed amendment grants the following officials to authorize the empowerment, and it lists the people that are in the law. I understand the concerns about the inability of the police to attend to all the enforcement needs raised by our excellent regulations that are designed to protect our quality of life here in Irvington. However, for reasons set forth below, I find the amendment as drafted is overbroad and insufficiently specific. An appearance ticket is written notice directing shipping to appear in local court. She talks about the differences. We don't specifically say felonies or misdemeanors. Our neighboring towns have no provision for village clerk, a treasurer, a village administrator, or water superintendent to have those powers. If Irvington has a specific need or plan for how these officials can aid police in enforcement, the board should make its reasoning in this matter better known to the public. She can't be present tonight, but she would respectfully request the amendment be updated as follows: that it apply only to violations and not to any misdemeanor or felony. I think that was pretty clear. That it made specific reference to the conditions set forward by section 150.10 of the criminal procedure law, as well as 160.10 and 150.30, including the requirement of personal service, that it provides for clear nexus between the issuance of appearance tickets and the performance of the specific duties of the issuing official. We cover that. Absent the showing of specific need and showing of specific reasons for adding additional officials, that the amendment at this time only include the fire inspector, the superintendent of DPW, and superintendent of Parks and Rec.
One question I had, what was the thing referring to? Personal service?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But
Does that mean you have to hand it to someone?
Yeah.
But I think that's defined by the CPL, actually.
Yeah, so it can't, and
It has to happen in your.
it can be problematic.
And it's- and there's-
service isn't easy, so if somebody, I'm not thinking about the person in the park with the dog, but maybe
A pile of leaves, what do you serve the
Exactly.
leaves?
You actually have to see the person doing it. So
you have to
never
get a processor to serve that
So
person.
that's-
I think with appearance tickets you can. You actually have to witness it in person. So remember when I
Yeah.
was with the sheriffs, we were actually peace officers, not police officers, and that was one of the big differences that had to occur in front of us. Not like the police can say, I think it was probably that guy because it's on his lawn.
Yeah, but I have to say on that stuff, you've got the prosecutor's better answering that.
Yeah, that would be part of the training too on what they, how it would all work.
So what you mean by this discussion about, is that there has to be actually eyes on the crime? Is that
That's
what we're talking about?
Actually, in the CPL, I think
Well, you would have to.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
you
different
can't-
to say there has to be eyes on the crime.
But-
The crime can be having the leaves out on the
Right.
street.
Right, you
Your
don't
eyes
have to
are
see
on
the
it.
person.
But finding the person who put the leaves there is more difficult.
So if, let's use the example of the dogs in the woods, and the recreation person saw the person, even asked the name of the person, and the person gave the name, and then by the time the police were there, that person was gone. But the name was known. This was the dog walker who said, "I'm sorry."
The police could.
So can't the police, on that information, actually do an appearance ticket?
The police
Yes?
could, yes.
They could,
No one
okay.
else can. Peace officers can't.
Okay.
The people that were enacting in our code could not.
So that police don't have to see it?
Police do not. If they think
Right.
if they have probable cause and someone says it was Connie Kehoe and she left,
Yeah, okay.
yes, they could.
Yeah, somebody gives you up, they can.
But in our instance, the park ranger couldn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't say it was Connie Kehoe just left. They can't track you down. They actually have to see you do it. It's actually that's in 150.30. It actually specifically says it has to be committed in their presence.
So the police could do that back in the office?
Potentially,
Yeah.
Or if they had the license plate number, I guess they could look up who the tractor.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think they can actually do it for vehicle and traffic. Like if you say, "Hey, I saw them go through a stop sign," they can't actually issue it for that. So there are some subtleties as well, but I don't know them all.
And the pictures that they take of in the Sawmill Parkway or whatever it is of your license,
It's different also.
that's different. Okay.
Then Catherine Johnson, this actually just came in, but we figured we'd include it anyway. Emailing quickly to Wayne with the hope to not authorize multiple parties within the village government to serve residents with appearance tickets. They can use the village to serve citizens with a summons to appear in criminal court. Strikes me as a soft form of over-criminalization that will detract from the quality of life here in Irvington. Apart from the fact that I personally don't want to see an increase in number of residents ordered to appear in court, giving police powers to public employees changes the relationship between taxpayer and government. Public authorities are a necessary evil at best. Most of us minimize our contact with them. Why put a friendly presence like Joe Archino into this category? I've come to think that where local police is concerned, a useful litmus test is to ask whether proposed change will make the village more or less attractive to a person considering a move to the river towns.
I guess that would depend is whether it's your dog off the leash or it's your kid who's scared by the dog off the leash.
Exactly right. She did not think that this passes that test. And then we had one more from Jeffrey Tamarin, came in on Monday. While they appreciate the concern for the preservation of public safety in the village of Irvington, we have grave concerns about the proposed amendment in its current form. Share concerns indicated in the letter submitted by our fellow Irvington residents Chris Wall and Beth Proper. We'd like to add the following. The amendment is overly broad in terms of number and types of public employees authorized to issue criminal appearance tickets. The amendment is overly broad and completely vague in terms of unspecified designees who may be empowered to issue criminal court appearance tickets. The criteria of designees is left to the complete discretion of Superintendent of Public Works and Superintendent of Parks. I guess we addressed all that. The amendment fails to demonstrate a nexus between the scope of specific duties, issue, and offenses for which a criminal court appearance may be issued. The amendment is not in keeping with similar provisions adopted by neighboring towns. Insufficient Irvington-specific research, information, and statistics have been kept from the public. What does this mean? It means job description, duties of each specific individual listed in the amendment, much less those of unspecific designees, are not interchangeable. Yet the amendment similarly empowers, I guess we kind of said we don't want this anyway, so I don't have to read that. Intending no disrespect to our current or future village officials or employees, we should like to point out that without a nexus between specific duties and applicable offenses, this is a real potential for criminal court appearance tickets to be issued in error due to lack of sufficient knowledge and expertise or familiarity with the applicable underlying code. They wanted to know more about the context. I think we provided that. As concerned citizens, we recognize any appearance before criminal court and consequences must not be taken lightly. They respectfully request that we not undertake this amendment in its current form. That's from Sharon Hammer and Jeffrey Tamarin. And that's the end of the correspondence, so now we'll open it up for whoever would like to speak.
Pat Ryan, 10 South Dutcher Street. I think you've pretty much pointed out already some of the concerns that I bring to this. I had a brief conversation with Larry, which gave me a little more understanding of the context. I certainly understand the desire to have better enforcement of certain issues in the code, but like most of you, I think this is real overreach, overly broad and vague. I had particular concerns about his or her designee in the two areas. Is that designee one specific person? Is it always that person? Could that person be the designee one week and somebody else the next week because that person isn't on? You know, I mean, it's very vague. I had real concerns about training. We, train our police officers for real reasons. They know how to diffuse a situation. They know how to de-escalate. I think those are all important things for someone who is going to be doing something like this. I had this whole section on applicability. All New York State, Westchester County and Village of Irvington laws is, I think, just kind of ridiculous. But I do think in the village code is disorderly conduct. I think that's a real problem. You're going to designate someone who is not identified as a code enforcement person to get involved in a situation that could have real repercussions. I don't know whether situations like underage drinking would be included in this. You have a group of adolescents in the park, and someone comes up to them who is not dressed as a policeman and says, "Oh, I am going to issue appearance summonses to all of you." These are kids. The situation gets out of control. Someone gets hurt. One of the kids or the employee. What does that lead to? So I have, real concerns with this. I know that code enforcement is important. But I don't think that this really is the answer. Some of your suggestions do seem to go a ways in terms of limiting this, but you're talking about untrained people who you're going to ask to interfere in situations that could be both dangerous and unacceptable. I mean, they are not trained to do this, and I don't think we should be asking them to do it. I think there's got to be a better solution. I think some of the things that have been suggested go a ways towards working out that solution, but I don't know if tickets that I know when I spoke to Larry, he said sometimes people don't care about getting a ticket. They're perfectly willing to say, all right, I'll pay my whatever, $25, $50. Maybe there needs to be, second offense, third offense, with increasing fines. Then, a summons. But this is, I think, a real overreaction to what is an obvious problem. So I would just ask you to rethink it. That's all.
Thank you. Jim?
Hi, Jill Rembar, Sunnyside Place. I was at the first meeting where you announced this. I think there were 3 board members sitting there, and I remember Larry said something like the reason for this was to take burden off the police, and that many other villages and municipalities do that. So before we do anything like that, before you sign anything like that to law, I would really hope that you could tell us what the other villages do. I know one of the letters that Brian read from was about how this is not how the other villages operate. So I'd really like to know how the other local municipalities operate, and what kinds of tickets they give, and how many they might give, and so we might know how much burden they're taking off the police in their areas. But it seems, and I share all of the concerns that Pat mentioned, the ones in your letters and the ones that you all mentioned tonight. It's broad and it's vague. One of the things that I think Larry said was that, or somebody said, was sometimes the police give warnings. So if you ever do anything like this, which it would be really great, I think, if you didn't, that it would be really important for people to give warnings before they give tickets. I mean, you may have slap-happy people who are, going to go, oh yeah, I'm going to write 100 tickets today. But I think for the quality of life in Irvington, nobody wants to be surprised by someone who comes up to them and says, oh, yeah, well, yeah, as Pat said, not in uniform. All of a sudden, somebody walks up to you and you're enjoying your lovely day in the park or on the street or wherever you are, and someone says, I'm giving you a ticket. This is kind of shocking. Now Irvington's a police state, and in a way that nobody expected. So there would have to be a really very, some sort of education program. I mean, I'm not the original scofflaw, but when I'm driving on the highway and I see a police car and I'm going 67 instead of 60, I slow down. So if there's somebody who's empowered to give me an appearance ticket for anything, I'd like to know who they are. So I have a chance to pick up that gum wrapper that I dropped by mistake, and put it in my pocket before they walk over. So I really think that we really want to know who is empowered to come and drag us off to court. And another thing, while I'm hoping that you don't do this, is why ask the department heads what they'd like to give tickets for? If you think you need to give a ticket for something that the police can't handle, why don't you just say, these are our 3 things? Because if this is generated by the board saying, with 1 or 2 things that you're having problems with, then why don't you decide, rather than get somebody's wish list and all of a sudden we're giving lots of tickets all over the place because we have department heads who want more power. I think it's great if we all follow the law, and I think it's great if we all do what we're supposed to do, but I don't think that we want to be policed all of the time by everybody, or even 6 more people than the police. So, thank you.
Yeah, but and I'm not going to answer all of it, but so for example, the clerk, she would only do things where someone didn't apply for the sidewalk permit. And it's just, it's not, we anticipate having a half dozen things maybe that could be enforced. I think the biggest one that would be outside would be something like dogs off leash, which is something I hear about multiple times a week, and I'm waiting for the disaster to happen. So, and we've tried having the police go with four-wheelers and be on both ends of the park, and we haven't been able to really accomplish it because, frankly, we typically only have 2 people on duty and 1 person on the desk. So, there's a very small limited, and I think the way we wrote this, the Broadway was poor, because I think when you see the half dozen things we're going to be talking about, I think there's not going to be that worry about you're going to be having a barbecue and then someone's going to say you didn't close your lighter fluid.
I'm sorry, maybe that's how it turned out, but, well, because somebody said, let's ask the department head. So then that opens it up to a whole lot of other things. And I'm just saying, I understand about, nobody wants a disaster that's waiting to happen, and I really hope that there is a way to educate the populace about disasters that are getting ready to happen, but also, anyway, I don't want to, we don't need to do that, but I appreciate what you're saying. But I really would like to know what other villages do.
Since I was one that suggested that approach, I'll have to explain myself in more detail, because it wasn't to open up a Christmas shopping list for the superintendents or the other department heads. It was, in fact, to get them to come to us with where they saw problems in their enforcement or interaction with the police and getting proper enforcement, so that we had a list. It wasn't that everything would be randomly just, oh yeah, this is the 20 things we got, so we're going to put them all in. But at least that way we'd have a good overview of where the various department heads and municipal employees thought there were problems. We would still be responsible for looking at it and narrowing it down to what is reasonable.
And my suggestion would be, when you find out what those things are, to see if the police can't do with some more, because if they're not always busy all the time, if they're not always busy all the time, then they could add those things to their list of things to do, instead of having, with the kinds of concerns that Pat was talking about with, strangers or unidentified people or people not in uniform approaching people to do that sort of thing, because if there is any room, it's not that I want the police, who I'm sure work hard, to be able to have a coffee break, but I think that they should be using all of their time doing all these kinds of things before, and we exhaust that before we bring in other people who aren't police to do those kinds of things. So thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I think we're going to have some pretty big changes, so we'll keep the public hearing open, I believe. We'll try it again. Maybe we'll talk about it.
Everybody's looking at me.
What do you want to say?
Information. I mean, it's
Yeah, we'll
easy
give
for
you
me
the
to
list.
make the changes, but you've got,
We can give you the list of,
yeah.
It would certainly have to be way more specific. I think I've heard that. I certainly feel that personally. We're very specific individuals, have very specific offenses that they could deal with, and I do think in some cases the police could be doing some of this stuff, as I was questioning about whether or not they could do it back in the office. Yeah, I have a lot of concerns about this, but I think we should keep it open and try so that we can counter the expense of asking, we certainly don't want to need to hire a whole nother police officer or even, something like that. That's a big, big expense. So that's a balance.
Well, like I was mentioning before, some villages have part-time hirees that are responsible for enforcement of very specific things. And those hirees are often, or could be, uniformed in the sense of not in a police uniform, but in a distinctive, not just in their, civilian
Yeah,
clothes.
that's the thinking that I like. Yeah, I like that thinking.
I just said one more thing, I'm sorry. If someone issues an appearance summons, do they also have to appear in court? So would that be then their time? Like Joe or his designee, do they have to appear when that case comes up in court?
I would imagine I don't handle court here at all, but if you can issue an appearance ticket and the person doesn't doesn't dispute it, they pay the fine, that's the end of it. I mean, if there's a trial, the person who witnessed what happened, who would have been the person who issued the appearance, would have to be there.
Right. But if the person comes, because they have to appear, does the person who issued that have to be there also?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's what I'm
They do.
saying.
So it would-
If they come and plead guilty, they'll get fined, it's the end of it. If they plead not guilty, it'll get scheduled for trial. And at the trial, the village has the burden of proof, and so the
Okay.
village would meet that burden by having the person who issued the ticket.
All right, but they wouldn't have to be there when that person comes to plead,
Yes.
No.
guilty or not guilty.
Oh, no?
No, well, not
No,
necessarily.
It's the same thing as getting a speeding ticket. If you
Mhm.
plead guilty, you'll get a date, and then the date would go to Joe Archinelli. You'd have to show up on the
Right,
13th.
okay, so it wouldn't have to be,
If you plead not guilty, right.
Yeah, well, Larry just pointed out, you
By mail.
can plead by mail
Yeah.
as well. If you plead by mail, there'll be a trial date set, and then for the trial date,
They
the
would have to
person who
show up.
issued the ticket would have to be there.
Joe-
so you could plead by mail for these appearance summonses? I
Yes.
thought you had to appear in court, and that was part of the reason why.
Then there's a date set.
I think the mayor's suggestion is like a speeding ticket where you could plead by mail, not guilty.
I thought that one of the reasons to do appearance summonses was that it was an extra burden, that the person would have to appear, and it cost them their
I
time.
think it
and-
depends on how they're written, actually.
Okay,
Well,
so,
but not if the, always you can, if you're
Well,
pleading
there's some, like, if
guilty.
you have an open, there's certain violations that you have to appear in court, an actual full appearance ticket. Like, if you have an open container, typically you have to show up in court. But, yeah.
Yeah, but those aren't
Is that what we're
No,
trying to
those
do
aren't
here?
Violations, right.
Those are violations of the code, those are violations of criminal.
That's criminal law.
And that's
correct.
But we're not talking
But that's what we're
about
saying, that's what I'm saying.
so you're taking that totally out of this,
Yeah,
because
but what-
as it reads here,
Because only the police can enforce the criminal law.
well, what does all New York State laws mean then?
That they would have the authority to do, but you could just clear where, I had said early on that I think it would be clearer if you just took that language
Right,
out.
okay, yeah. I just
Yeah.
wanted to,
Yeah.
okay.
Because I'm really, the point of this is just to address situations where the police aren't available to address those situations, right? I mean, it's
Either
not.
they're not available, or you don't want to use police
Right,
resources.
right.
Or
But-
somebody else has more expertise with the particular issue we're talking about. So we're probably talking about 3 or 4 discrete things: leaves, snow, dogs.
Trees. Yeah,
And,
very few things.
and the Main Street violations
Oh,
of
so
like
that-
cafes or things.
And things spilling out into the street.
Marion, I did have just one question. So, but if we were to enact something like this, that we wouldn't be eliminating that preliminary layer. Larry, you mentioned that now there's our approach is to issue warnings first.
Well, that has nothing to do, that has nothing
That's
to do
basically how
with
it's
the law,
enacted.
that's just an
It's all
ordinance.
That's more like, we would want to give people a warning, that's more of a policy issue than an actual code.
And that does happen, like with the DPW and with other things, I think there's always.
We don't see this turning Irvington into a police state. This is,
Yeah,
the same
that's-
person
that's-
keeps doing the same thing. We say,
Right.
you know what, we don't have to make the police go out, because I've talked to Mrs. Kehoe 7 times about not putting her, garbage out in the middle of the road. Sorry, I told you last time that, we gave you 3 warnings and now we're going to write you an appearance
And
ticket.
it also doesn't change enforcement process at all. That exists as it exists in the criminal procedure law, or the procedures in the court, but it's just, the only change it makes is what additional people can issue tickets.
Continuing it over and opening a new public hearing,
Okay, so that's, well,
Keeping it open.
keeping it
yes,
open.
okay.
Make a motion to open a public hearing, consider local law amending Chapter 9, Board of Architectural Review of the Village Code to provide for standard of review on appeals from the Board of Architectural Review to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we have a couple Architectural Review Board folks here, the chair and member. Thanks for coming. Oh, three. Three. So we're going to little
Let me
document.
explain it, yeah.
Yeah.
What this local law would do would fill a gap in the current law on the review of ARB decisions. The ARB chapter provides that anyone aggrieved by an ARB decision may appeal the decision to the ZBA, and that the ZBA can reverse or affirm the ARB decision. It doesn't provide, however, what the standard of review that the ZBA is supposed to use in reviewing ARB decisions. 99% of the, probably more than 99% of the applications that come before the zoning board are for variances, and the standards for granting or denying variances are detailed in the New York State Village Law. They're also in the Irvington zoning code, but those laws are silent, as is case law silent, as to what the standards are for reviewing a board's decision. And recently there have been a couple of appeals to the ZBA from the ARB decisions, and it's been unclear to the ARB what they have to demonstrate to the ZBA in order to have their decision upheld. And so what this local law would do is provide that in an appeal from an ARB decision, the ZBA is to review whether the decision was arbitrary, capricious, and unsupported by substantial evidence in the record. It also provides that if the ZBA does reverse the ARB decision, it's to be sent back to the ARB there would be the ARB that actually approves the application. They have to follow the ZBA decision, and they could impose reasonable conditions or take any other action consistent with the ZBA decision. Now, one of the questions that the ZBA raised is, okay, so if it goes back to the ARB and they impose some conditions, and the conditions are really unreasonable, can those be appealed? And well, certainly they could, because it would be a new decision. I don't think that needs to be stated in the law, but it could be, if you see a sentence that says, you know, any subsequent decision of the ZBA, you know, I'm sorry, of the ARB, you know, is subject to appeal. And then there was one other thing in the email from the ZBA, from Bruce Clark on behalf of the ZBA, and he suggested that the standard be arbitrary, capricious, or unsupported by substantial evidence. I think it was good to focus on the conjunctions there, although I would do it a little bit differently. I think it should be arbitrary and capricious. I went back and looked at Article 78 of the CPLR, which is the standard for reviewing board decisions if they go to court, and it can be reversed either if it's arbitrary and capricious or unsupported by substantial evidence. So my suggestion would be that the language be changed to arbitrary and capricious or unsupported by substantial
That's
evidence.
consistent with CPLR, yeah.
So that's a little change, but well, Deb, Deb and Rick probably going to talk to, but they had also, I think their suggestion was good about making a provision for if the person doesn't like the ARB decision, they can ask for findings of fact or whatever. And then the reason I did not include that the first time was until, I guess recently, on the couple of decisions I saw, there've been very substantial decisions, you know, whether it was in the minutes or the decisions, and so it seemed like it was an unnecessary step. But I understand now that you're not going to have decisions in minutes like that, so your suggestion makes sense, and I think that would be it. So that there's a decision they don't like, that the person can go to the ZBA and say, I want you to state your reasons for it. It also gives a little bit more time for the appeal. I think it's a good idea, certainly doable. That could be added.
Go to the ARB and ask for,
I'm sorry, go to the ARB.
yeah, you got ZBA.
I'm sorry. Go to the ARB and ask them to explain the decision.
And document it.
Reconsider and explain the decision.
Yeah, because we need to also be able to have time to have the actual minutes documented if on cases that are going to become more controversial.
Yeah, I understand there's been a change in how the minutes have been handled, so I think that's an important change.
Hi, Rocco Rizzullo, Chair of the Architecture Review Board. Part of the reason for asking for this 30-day finding of fact time is, depending upon which meeting we deny the person at, it could be only a few days between our meeting and the ZBA when it's put on the agenda. That clearly does not give us enough time to and even document through the minutes whether or not where our decision came from. In addition to that, it really they should formally ask for a finding of fact, and then give us 30 days to prepare that, and then be put on the ZBA if in fact they don't agree with our finding of facts. That was really the other part of, and it's not new legislation. This is the way City of Rye does it already. So, and that's where the verbiage came from.
Yeah, well, actually, the standard had come from Rye. That's where I got the whole
When I
thing
saw
was
it,
from Rye.
that's why we highlighted that
But
part
I
of
just
Rye.
didn't put that stuff in
Right.
because until, on a couple of big decisions, you had elaborate minutes.
Right.
But I think what you
Which we're not going to have anymore. It's going to be very
Right.
cut and dried. The other issue, just while I'm up here, is there's actually a third issue. It's it just went out of my head.
Continuation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you remember, you have my email in front of you.
Yes, I do.
As far as the continuation is concerned, as I explained in the email, we do not have an ability to continue an application. We actually, like I said, if there's an application being made to us, a presentation being made to us, our only recourse is to say, well, you don't conform or you don't comply. We would recommend perhaps taking you continuing, the applicant continuing the application, because if you were to ask for a vote tonight, we certainly, I don't see that, enough votes up here to approve the application. So rather than deny it and be done with it, we'd rather you come back. And frankly, over the past 4, 5, 6 months, it's worked very well, even with very large applications. So.
I'm sorry, is that a problem, the way that's not working?
No, but
Just that it's not officially.
yeah, it's not really the way it should be.
Just agree.
It's not, actually, it's not a bad way to do it at all, because, for instance, it happens all the time under the secret regs, because under the secret regs, you're supposed to have a decision by a certain time. That, okay, you get your decision tonight, the decision's gonna be no. Or you can agree to extend the time and we can hear this out, and you can make changes and whatever. So there's nothing underhanded or
No,
devious about it. I mean, it's
Not at all.
It's actually good process.
I just feel it's only one-sided. It's only the applicant that can ask for a continuation. The ARB cannot ask for cannot recommend a continuation. Effectively, that's the only thing that that we saw. Unless I'm missing something, I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that issue comes up, it actually came up in Hastings, and there was a real concern, because in a slightly different way, the concern was applicants didn't want to get held up for too long before the ARB, so there was kind of a pressure they have to end, so it's kind of hard to come to the middle ground, I guess, but I think, I know what you're saying, and that section is kind of hard to find. That provision, if it's a provision, is a little bit hard to find. But you're right, it's there. I'm not sure why it was put there. Maybe because of this concern. And I think that happened probably a lot when the ARB laws were created, because people were concerned that, we don't want to hold the process up too much. But I think that's a good way to handle it, to say, we can vote tonight, but you know how it's going to come out. So why don't you try to fix it up and come the next meeting? It's not a bad way of handling it.
I mean, I don't have a problem doing that. I just thought that would be more appropriate just to say, you're missing this, this, and this. We would like to continue it until the next meeting. Until you
I
come
think
back.
I mean, if I could just jump in on that aspect of it. It's not even so much of a, like, we think you need to rethink this particular design element or something, and if you were to present it to us now, we probably wouldn't have the votes. It's more like what happens when they actually come before and they don't have sample materials and they don't have X, Y, Z that should be on the checklist.
Yeah.
Or they don't have an updated drawing that matches what they're asking. At that point, I think we should empower the ARB just to say, you know what, this is not complete, come back. And right now, they can't do that.
Let me look at the code, because what I would say in a situation like that, although I don't know how that particular chapter reads, it's not a complete application, so we're not going to consider it until it's a
So those
complete
are two different,
application.
right, those are two different things that
Yeah.
you might, I think you're asking that you can ask for continuation of something where it's not complete. But you can also suggest to the person that, you know, we can continue this and
Right.
we might come to terms at the next meeting. But if a person really wants to go directly to the ZBA, they can.
And I do think you're right. I think that it's something, I mean, maybe it's just not clear enough, but there really needs, I know from watching the activity, you know, it's that situation where they just don't have the right materials and they don't have the drawings. They're starting to talk about stuff and now the drawings don't match what they're talking about. And it's kind of like, it'd be far stronger, better for the village probably just to say, come back.
Yeah, I think that's a good
I think Rick makes a very good point. It seems logical to me and in the best interest of the village for them to be empowered to say, come back.
Well, I think they are.
Yeah, I mean, in general, yes,
It
it
should
just
be
slipped
clarified.
through the
Although I
cracks.
just want to, Larry pointed out to me, he's absolutely right, and I meant to say it. Those are good points. I think they should be looked at separately from the.
Oh, they're not
standards
part of the
review.
appeals thing.
No, it's not part of
Yeah.
this. It has nothing to do with appeals. It just has to do with the ARB process. And I have a feeling that after the discussion tonight, there might be a couple of other things we want to look at and clarify.
And as you know, from sitting, you know, on the board, it was apparent to me, while I was on the board, that there needs to be, and something Brian and I have talked considerably about, is we really need to streamline that whole process. And from what I understand, I had a conversation with a local architect who used to be on the Architecture Review Board, and he was under the impression that the ARB is supposed to receive the drawings within a reasonable amount of time from the same time that or during the same time that the planning board is reviewing the drawings. And I can tell you that's not happening. That if it did happen, it would give us more time to look at the whole picture. So when it comes to us, and I don't know whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't think, because when the, like, for instance, all the applications were due today for the next planning board meeting. One of those sets gets set, I don't know whether it's one or two sets goes to the ARB. I'm not sure whether it's one or two.
Well,
Maybe-
what I'm saying is that
maybe it's
I'm not getting
something
them.
Maybe it's up in the
Zero.
building.
It's zero.
Maybe it's up in the building department, I don't know, but you check with that on there, because I know, because they have to put in 18 sets, you know, and some, and I know there's at least one or two sets that go to the
We're
ARB.
talking.
So why don't, talk to Ed or Sarah, actually Sarah Glam was the one who distributes it. Just
I
find
was
out
more
what it is.
looking more along the lines of confirming it, if that was in fact the case, if it was,
Yeah.
we were supposed to get it, because, you know, we get our packets on Thursday usually, and, you know, 3 or 4 days to look at the Ardsley Country Club, for
Yeah.
instance, as
Yeah.
an example.
And maybe
It
it's
was a little
sitting
rough.
up there, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, that was always my understanding.
Yeah, right.
Oh, you don't know? Yeah,
My
check with that.
Of the discussions we've had on that, and I know we're a little far afield, but just to finish that point, my understanding from discussions up here is that we have felt that it was helpful, especially in big proposals, for the ARB to speak up rather soon in the process with an applicant and say, wait, at this point, if you were, you know, you've got this design, you should think about changing this, because eventually it's going to come to us, and it would be a shame for you to spend months and months and go in this direction, and it finally comes to us and we say, you know what, this isn't appropriate architecturally. So to be able to chime in and start the process, making it, you know, really more efficient earlier on, I thought was what we were hoping would happen. And I don't know if that does happen, but it's
I
I
think
think
the
we
code
all here
allows-
think that that's what should happen.
The code allows it, as far as I understand. It's just a matter of procedural or process, I think, that,
Yeah, I think we did check the code one night.
and it should, maybe, I don't know how that works, but maybe throwing it out, there is a point where the village it goes over the planning board, what's coming before it. Maybe there is a reason to have an ARB representative there just to know which ones, or to indicate which ones are problematic or might be problematic. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, what tends to happen is when there's an application before the planning board, that the architecture is important. They always they ask the ARB to take a look at it. That happened with the train station, because they knew that was gonna be a big ARB issue. So they asked them to look at that.
Brightview, yes.
Brightview, I think it happened in the
3040.
the building on, across from the train station, Esther Place building. So, pardon?
12 Astor.
Yeah, so they do. But Connie, so much of this stuff that comes before the,
Doesn't matter, but
yeah.
for the ones that
But on the
do,
ones that it's gonna be, that ARB, input is gonna be significant, generally they are asked to go and say, what does the ARB think?
I guess what I'm
Doesn't happen
thinking
a lot.
too is that if they do get materials and something sets a flag for them,
Yeah.
there are some house, rebuilds, complete renovations where I know I've seen that there's been architectural issues about, does it even work, first mechanically, and secondly, is it appropriate for, the neighborhood or the style of whatever. So that would be something that I guess you guys should feel proactive in terms of coming to the planning board and saying, hey, we're seeing an issue here. But that means
If we
you
have
have to
documents, we'd be able to.
you'd have to get the documents.
Yeah, but the other thing is, I haven't seen, and maybe there've been issues, I've never seen something come back, and never seen, but what is, I guess, about 7 years I've been representing the planning board, that somebody came back and said, hey, the AR, this happened at the ARB, I have to change my site plan. I gotta say,
Not so much the site plan as much as the facade, some of the facade stuff.
well, yeah, but then it's not affected by the site plan.
One that comes to mind was up off Cyrus Field, there's a family named Burgos that they were putting in a pool, and we found, a couple of our architects on the board found some inconsistencies with pitch and other things that were a problem architecturally. And they had to go and make those changes. They went back in front of the planning board, and then came back in front of us. So it does happen. It doesn't happen often, but it
Not often,
happens.
yeah.
It happens from time to time.
Yeah.
well, I'm
Here's a way
glad,
to fix it, yeah.
I'm glad to see then that, that it does happen in the important ones that it's supposed to happen in. And if it didn't, somebody would speak up and make it happen, I guess. Yeah, okay.
Just had a question. Deb Hargraves, I'm a member of the ARB. It's probably more specifically directed to Mary Ann, but in terms of the standard of review, if we're going to change the language to arbitrary and capricious or unsupported by substantial evidence, I'm curious what unsupported by substantial evidence will mean, if that's going to be defined, but more importantly, how the ZBA will understand that. Because when I look at the ZBA decisions where they reversed us, and I go through them, what took me by surprise is that they're making findings of fact, that they're actually talking to the building inspector, finding out information that was not presented to us when the applicant came before the ARB, or that the building inspector did not tell us, that was not in the file. In both instances, when I went through the reversals of the ARB, they actually summarized, and in one instance, in one letter, September 17, 2015, the chairman of the ZBA actually says what follows was an unfortunate combination of miscommunication and timing. And then he reiterated his findings of fact. And so my concern is, if you put that language in, unsupported by substantial evidence, how is the ZBA going to understand what that means? Are they going to then feel that if there's not enough findings of fact that rise to their level, of, sufficiency that they're going to go out and look for other findings of fact? Are they going to really rely on what we give them and what is before us when the applicant comes to our meetings?
So what's your suggestion?
So I don't know if I have a suggestion as much as I'm a little bit more
It
concerned by that.
wouldn't be a defined term, no, that's a term that,
Right.
is used regularly.
That's what I assumed. But at least if you left it arbitrary, capricious, and unsupported by substantial evidence, I'd probably feel more comfortable, because I know what arbitrary and capricious means, and I know how courts interpret that. But once you put the "or" in between, I feel like they could disregard whether it's arbitrary or capricious and just look to say, well, there wasn't enough findings of fact. And to some extent, we only given what we're given. Are we supposed to go outside of the application and actually go call the building inspector and look through prior correspondence? That's not what I understand our role is to be. So what I would feel more comfortable is knowing that the ZBA is going to make a decision based on what's before us, not what they find out after the fact. So I don't know how you go around it, but if you really look at that conjunction, it's going to be a problem if you change it.
Makes sense, thanks, Dave.
So what you would prefer would be for the ZBA to send it back to you, saying you need to develop more of the factual, but
Well-
you only have what you're given.
Right. I mean, in the ideal world, really, if they were a true appellate court, the ZBA can only decide what is before them. They're not allowed to go out
Right.
and gather other evidence. So to make me comfortable as a member of the ARB that we're really going to be reviewed in accordance with what's before us, they should not be allowed to look at anything outside of that, even if they hear a conversation on the street, because really, that's not their role.
Oh,
And-
so your concern is that when we're saying unsupported by evidence, it could be evidence besides what
What
was
they
before
have,
the
yeah.
ARB.
Exactly.
The general understanding would be it'd be unsupported by the evidence that was before you, but I see what you're
But
saying.
when I look at
But
prior
yeah.
decisions,
I mean, that's probably not a bad way to say unsupported by the evidence before the ARB.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is
that
what
would-
certainly-
that seems like a
And
great way
then
to
you would
do
want
it.
to go back more,
Specifically, I think.
but then you would want
No,
to.
not going back, no. you
That's
can
the
go
second
back for-
piece.
No, not for more evidence.
Right.
What they're going back for is just for their findings of fact, what you don't spell out what the basis of your decision was.
Right, but I think the second piece, what you're referring to, is that we do believe, which is not happening now, that once it goes to the ZBA, should they reverse or deny, however the phrasing is, the application itself should still come back to the ARB, because only we can approve or disapprove an application. Really, technically, a review court shouldn't be doing that. They should just be sending it back down again. Then we look at it, because every application has more than one issue. We rarely have one thing that we're looking at, and the particular item that was appealed was probably only one of many issues. So when it comes back to us, unfortunately, it's a bit of a delay for the applicant, but it's the right way to handle it. If it comes back to us, we look at what the ZBA decision is, and we apply it, and then we also make a ruling, approve, disapprove, and then the applicant's on his way back to the building department.
And that is in the law, the way it's written down, yes.
Anyone else from the public want to speak? Not that you guys are very public. Anyone else on the board have on this?
Well, I did go back to Chapter 9 and look at what criteria the ARB is to use. There's an A, a B, a C, and a D in the section. I don't know if Mary Ann has her book whether or not.
I don't have the book with me. There's not
Okay,
really
yeah.
an A, B, C, D.
Right, it's there. Oh, there's the part of the code, yeah. Doesn't it start at the very beginning of the chapter?
Oh, that thing, well, yeah, but actually, that's not the real hard, but what Rick passed to me is he has the residences shall conform to the following requirements, that if they're adjacent to each other, they shouldn't be too similar or too dissimilar, and the geometry of the structure. Now, those are the structural requirements. There's another section further on, I think it's 9.5 maybe, where it says that you can, that the ARB can deny an application if it finds that it's not in harmony with the district, or, do you ever get that?
So the thing that I'm talking about is like
Thank you, Deborah.
the very beginning of that code.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't-
the structural requirements. All residences shall conform to the following requirement. Houses adjacent to each other shall not look alike. That's the main one. Then, in approved locations of all houses on adjacent lots, where 3 or more houses front on a straight or slightly curved street, they shall not be similarly oriented with equal front yard dimensions. Those you probably don't even get that much. Those are probably not applications they get a lot, those standards. Those are what even the code plus, the structural requirements. But if you go further on the sections 9-7 about disapproval of application, and it says that the board can disapprove a building permit if it finds that it wouldn't be compatible with the purposes set forth in 9-1. And
That's
those
what I'm
purposes
thinking
are
of, the 9-1.
improving Yeah, but those aren't the standards. 9-1, if they say if it wouldn't be compatible with those purposes, which are to improve the exterior appearance of buildings, continue the harmonious development of the village, prevent the impairment of property values, and protect the historic character.
Right, those are the same things, okay.
And thereby be detrimental to the desirability, property values, and development of the surrounding area, or not be in keeping with the harmonious development of the district in which the proposed structure is to be located. And then it goes on to say that those findings can't be based on personal preference, but they have to be limited to the harmonious development of the district. Those are standards.
Right. Yeah, then I guess they
There are more
are the same
specific
thing.
standards, there are more specific standards for the, removal of a historic building. Then there's, building in the historic district. And then, as you know, in the solar panel regulations, we've got specific standards, but there are standards.
I think the problem
Thanks,
that I've seen from looking at the two appeal results is that it seems, my take on reading through what I recall is kind of a stance being taken that they don't believe that there's enough quantitative standards for a decision, whatever that may be, because there aren't quantitative standards per se, there are qualitative standards in that section about whether it's conformal to the nature of it. Those are qualitative. So it seems like the ARB is empowered to make those, but the ZBA, when it comes at it, my assumption is they're coming at it kind of still in a variance kind of mentality and looking for quantitative metrics. And you're not going to get that in a lot of these kinds of style-related or, neighborhood impact-related kind of decisions.
Speak to that. If I just comment on that, that is one of the things that actually I was most concerned about when we received the first of the two decisions that overturned us. In both of the decisions of April 27, 2016 and September 17, 2015, they are actually granting a request for a variance. That is not what happens when you appeal to the ZBA. I mean, Marianne said that earlier. So even the introductory paragraph shows you that they're applying, and in fact, one of the letters they refer to, they're applying a variance standard. This is not that standard. So they're applying language that is associated with one of the village law section and the criteria, and actually in one of the decisions, the chair of the ZBA says, this criteria does not seem to directly apply to the application, but it's instructive. That's what I'm concerned about, because whether it's instructive or not doesn't matter. It's not a standard, and it's a completely different analysis.
So,
Which is what, and that's exactly what this law is trying to fix. It's a different rule for reviewing a board's decision. You got a different standard of review for that. And can I just say one thing to relate back to something earlier you said that, see, it does say unsupported by substantial evidence of record. I guess you could clarify and say substantial evidence in the record before the ARB is what you're really getting.
That's, yeah.
That might be helpful.
So the one thing that I just want to bring up is actually, we didn't read or reference directly the ZBA response letter, but, I seem to recall that they made the assertion that they were following already a process of these criteria, not as a variance, but as, looking at the arbitrary, capricious, whatever nature. So I would think almost that one thing that we want to do is if we do pass this law at some future date, we might want to actually make sure the ZBA understands how it differs from from a variance. You know, kind of like a little mini training course, just so you can put them on record, on notice to say, hey, it's not, you guys are shaking your heads over there. Well, there's no way to do that. Who's going to do it?
Maybe it will.
Well, I mean, Mark,
Bruce always likes to get emails from me, so I guess I don't know.
Mark, you're talking about the intent, what is our intent as we're making this law? We're talking about the intent of our action here. And I certainly think that it's not out of the question, once we, fix up the language we've just talked about, and, we vote on this change, this amendment to Chapter 9, that it's clear what our intent is, and if we need to explain the intent, is that a bad idea to try to explain the intent of the law?
What about if we just
No,
do
but
it?
you know what, the
Exactly.
other thing is, it also gives direction to the ARB. The ARB knows what they have to argue before the zoning board. Hey, listen, our decision was not arbitrary and capricious. It was supported by evidence, substantial evidence on our record. And right now, that's not there. The truth is, the way the law is now, without having any standard of review stated, is they can look at it de novo. They can look at it as if it's a de novo, means as if it's a new case. That's why the standard has to be in there.
Okay, so it should
Because
stand on its own.
I did an exhaustive research on this, and there's no case law on it. And I just saw a couple of references in cases that indicated where standard of review for reviewing a board's decision is not stated, then the zoning board can look at it. De novo means like as if the application's before them, what you were just talking about, that there was nothing wrong about their doing that, because there wasn't, although that's not what they said they did, but that was the way to look at it.
But this should clear that up by passing this kind of language.
It's
should be
giving,
clear.
it's giving you the standard of review. The standard of review was arbitrary and capricious, or not supported by substantial evidence, which was not there before.
The ZBA was also, though, brought up that they were hoping that this board would set forth for the criteria for the ARB, but it seems like that's covered in the code. It's set forth. It's not like 2 from column A and 3 from column B, but it's clear that there are guidelines and it's there.
I think that's what Mark was saying,
Yeah.
it's there, it's not it's not laid out the way it is for variances, but.
And that's the way we see it, and that's the way you see it. However, what I think Mark is saying, and is that they want something that's very cut and dry. They want us to say, the reason we're denying is reason 1 or reason 2 or reason 3, whatever's already in the code. And that's, you can't do that. You can't put, those very specific reasons in the code. It has to be, I think the code actually, while it may need a little fine tuning, I don't think it's far from what we use as criterion to make our decisions already.
I mean, basically, your decision isn't percentage based.
Right.
And variances for being rude about it is kind of percentage based in a lot of cases. So that's what I mean by quantitative.
Yeah. So my suggestion is that I revise it to add that, findings of fact provision, tweak the language a little bit to respond to what Bruce Clark said and what Deb said, and in terms of the standard review.
I was just wondering if the other members of the ARB they've been part of the communication and.
After every meeting,
Yeah.
we sit and have these conversations of how we feel, about, and I just distribute to everybody the ZBA's findings and their letters. And
With these tweaks, you were comfortable with the language, the arbitrary and capricious, and
the way,
with Deb's,
yeah.
because you guys are on the ground there, knowing what happens day after day, so it's important that it makes sense to you guys.
So one other question is, because it's a resolution that will be listing changes to the code, could it have essentially a preamble of stating the intention of it, rather than having to have training about it, just be very upfront about what's the intention of this change?
You mean when we do the resolution?
Yes, like sort of a
whereas.
whereas, where we actually are very clear about what the legislative intent is. Not just that we expect you to understand that this change of criteria, but maybe, I don't know what, but maybe instead
You
of.
mean anything beyond whereas the code is silent, is
Yeah,
the standard of review, and, whereas we want to include a standard of review?
I think the things you normally put in your whereases probably,
Well, usually we don't put them in
Oh.
when we're enacting local
In
laws.
these
Once in a while we do, once in a while.
There whereas is in the resolution, right? Not in the.
yeah, in the
Real
resolution,
resolution.
that's why and
Okay.
therefore we are proposing this change. I think I agree with Mark that might be appropriate in this case.
And the third point that the ZBA made, I think we've discussed it, or it's implied in what we've discussed, that if it goes back to it should go back to the ARB for the imposition of reasonable conditions or other further action. Reasonable according to the standards, wanted to be arbitrary and unreasonable, so we're talking reasonable. It's an interpretation, but it's pretty clear.
But reasonable to whom?
Well,
Reasonable to the ZBA or reasonable to
To your
Reasonable
standard.
to you.
Well, reasonable to the ZBA, and then, if the applicant thinks they're unreasonable,
They
they
can
can
go
go back up to the zoning appeals and say the conditions were unreasonable.
Yeah, we said that from the beginning, that they should, part of the reason to change this language was that we're not closing off further appeal, that people can go back.
What I'd add at the end of it, is, at the end of that, section 9.9 is, any such subsequent decision of the ARB shall be appealable to the ZBA.
Okay.
But I mean, the intention there is that we're not assuming the ARB is going to arbitrarily just say, well, forget it, we don't agree with the fact that you overruled us. I mean, you can't go back, it's like an appeals court sends it back to a lower court.
No,
and
it
says-
can. It says it for, and other further action consistent with the decision of the zoning board of
Yeah,
appeals.
exactly.
Yeah, that's in there. They can't do that. But, for it,
The other elements.
yeah, I'm thinking about the house, and the siding in the house, you said they could. Right, and then maybe it would come back and there's some, some tweaking you could do or something you do, with respect to the windows and stuff, but once,
Well, I mean, if you look at issues like solar arrays,
right,
if in fact it's, clearly, in the front of a house or in an objectionable area, and we deny it based on that, we also have not talked about the array itself.
Right.
If it has a jagged edge, if
So
if they've
so-
overruled us and it's gonna go there, we need to make sure that it's not as offensive as it looks, in the original application. So
That's a
there's,
perfect example.
that's really the
Yeah,
basis
good
of
example.
why we need
Yes.
to see it.
good example.
So we're keeping the
So we're keeping the public
hearing
Keep the
open?
public hearing open again, and I think there's some pretty clear and not too onerous tweaks, actually.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty close here.
Important.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Your
Appreciate all the
volunteer
work on this.
service.
Thank you.
One more.
Yeah. I will now make a motion to open a public hearing to consider a local law amending the zoning code to permit in-law apartments and one-family dwellings as an accessory use. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Public hearing's open.
Yeah, we got the two, you guys won. Third time's the charm.
All right. Well, this is one we've talked about for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to bring us, you want to bring us up to speed here?
Oh, what the in-law apartments?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this one quite a bit.
Yeah, this would permit, in, single-family houses, wherever the single-family house is, whatever district is, an additional living area, including a kitchen, solely for the use of a family member or caregiver and that person's family, of an occupant of the single-family residence. and then provided that. I'll go through the conditions. The reason this law is necessary is ordinarily, if a living area has a kitchen in it, it's considered a dwelling unit. And if it's a dwelling unit, it has to meet all the requirements of the state building code for a separate dwelling unit, and sometimes these wouldn't be able to because they might not have a second means of access or a wind-up door or whatever. So, what makes it a separate dwelling unit is the kitchen. So if you had like a different living area for your, mother-in-law to live in, and then there's not a kitchen, probably wouldn't be a problem. But once there's a kitchen, anyway. So this would allow that. And the conditions are that the in-law apartment has to be located within the principal dwelling, not an accessory structure, and there has to be an unobstructed passageway between the in-law apartment and the main dwelling unit. So it cannot be a separate unit. It defines family as people related by blood, marriage, or adoption. The owner or lessee of the single-family residence must occupy either the main dwelling unit or the in-law apartment. Only one in-law apartment is permitted for single-family residence. The residence can also contain an accessory apartment. There can't be any exterior changes to the building that would alter the appearance of the single family character. The main dwelling unit, the in-law apartment have to share water, sewer, and electric facilities. The whole house has to comply with the New York State Building Code. There can't be any violations, and then it's got the registration provisions. The Section 3, in the two-family districts, it already says any use is permitted in the one-family district, so automatically this would be allowed. And then in the bid, it's listed as business permitted use in the business district for one-family farm. One other thing I should say is this is different from the accessory apartments in that this is essentially, you don't have to get a permit for it or anything. You can just do it. There's no special permit to have this unit. It's just an accessory use the same way as a home office, a legal home office. And so the registration provisions are the same as for a home office. And then
So you have to register, but you just don't have to,
register, yeah. But you don't have to get a special permit provision is, a bigger deal. You have to go for the planning board. And then a fee, there's a fee put in of $50. Pretty much it.
Well, I feel like we talked about this one, we tweaked it at least 3 times, maybe more. But if anybody has any comments on the board, otherwise we'll open up for the public.
I do have one question is, we got feedback from the county, right, on this particular?
Yeah, but the county didn't understand. They said, why don't you just have accessory apartments? The county didn't understand that we already have an accessory apartment law.
I think because what they were saying is like, you don't limit it to members of the family.
Right.
But that seems to me that it's kind of highly problematic if you leave your,
Yeah, and then
you wouldn't do a lot
But they went on to say, many communities have accessory apartment laws. But we have that too. This is in addition to that. They wouldn't have known that. We just send them the local law. They're not going to check your code to see what all your other laws are, so.
Okay.
So we're not doing anything inconsistent with what the county recommended.
Any comments from the public? I know you've both been very involved in this.
I do. I have one comment. Becky Clark, I'm a member of the Housing Committee. And item K, section 1. My notes from my last meeting had changed some of the words here, and I don't see that reflected in the most recent copy, which I have to admit I only downloaded and printed today, so I apologize for that. But we had discussed, I believe, that in the event that a resident with an in-law apartment is sold or transferred to the new owner or lessee may, within 90 days from the taking of title, et cetera, I don't know that our intention was that it had to be re-registered every time a tenant changed. that we were concerned with ownership changes, but not if it's a single-family house, but it's rented, and the tenants change, that it would then have to be re-registered each time It doesn't say
that
that. It says,
changes.
You mean,
this is
Do we have the
June
same
15th.
copy?
As long as I'm reading the same
you mean you're
copy.
talking about the tenant of the main house? The principal residence is not the owner, it's a tenant.
Right, the principal
Yeah,
resident is a tenant.
I would think it would be important, because so if one long-term tenant or even a short-term tenant is in there, and they have their, caregiver living there, and then the apartment's rented out to somebody else, you have to know that the other one is being used by, I would think.
By people who are qualified to.
Yeah, I would think, so I would think anytime the
Tenant change, the main occupant
the
changes.
main occupant changes, you would have to re-register. It's not a big deal. It's not like it's a big deal
Planning board
process,
application
right?
Okay, well, I wasn't sure if there was, rationale behind it, or it
I
just
don't
been
remember
left in.
discussing it,
Yeah, well,
I missed that one.
right, I don't know, I have it in my notes, as I said.
Or maybe that
but it-
came up at your committee to me.
Yeah, it was at the committee
Yeah.
meeting, and then looking at this, I see that this had not been changed. So,
Yeah.
part of the registration is listing who the occupants of the in-law apartment would be.
Well, what you have to do is say in it, you have an affidavit stating compliance with sections A through I above. And
Okay,
one
so
of
that's
the
who this
things
is.
is that it's a family member.
Right.
Or a caregiver.
Okay.
Right, so, yeah, if that changes.
Family member.
And it still says in the event of the residence is sold or transferred, the new owner or lessee may, within 90 days, file a registration form. And since that's all that's required, it should be just kind of a heads up, there's a new owner.
Well, new ownership, clearly.
Yeah, but you're talking about tenants.
A new tenant. But I see the rationale. You want to make sure that there's the right people, they're not just letting somebody.
Well,
have
also,
a lot.
you don't, you have no way of knowing if they actually have a need or not, if they're just, you know what I mean? Like,
For a caregiver.
yeah, there's a new tenant, they would probably have to, I could see the point of
Yeah.
signing an affidavit that says, I need a
Somebody had
caregiver
rules, so
here.
they have a Mercy student in there, and
Yeah.
makes money off the Mercy student. Yeah.
Okay, in that case, we leave it as is.
I think that makes, yeah, I think we should leave it.
As always, the balance between trying to make it as user-friendly as possible, but maintain appropriate oversight and control.
And again, there's the enforcement issue as well. Who's going to make sure that tenants and owners know this and follow it? And when you move in someplace and say, oh, there's a nice apartment there.
Well, I'll tell you,
That's
the
another
real
issue
reason
we
this was
talked
put
about.
in is Ed was the one who raised it. Because
Right.
when we were looking at the accessory apartment law, Ed said, well, that's all fine and dandy, but there aren't that many people who are gonna qualify for accessory apartments. But I get a lot of calls about people who wanna know whether they can have, an in-law apartment, because they're around in a lot of places. So there are people who are looking for it. And then this year, and I would have to say no, because we didn't have any provision for it. Once there was a separate kitchen in it, it was it's a two-family house. And there was an application in Matheson Park where they did want to have a separate unit for their parents. And they couldn't the way it was set up because there were two kitchens. It was a two-family residence and a one-family. So
Now they could.
As long as there's no
I
locked
shouldn't say
door.
that.
No, all right, now something like that could, right. All right, well, I'm happy with
And
this.
I'm very happy with this.
I think it's been a lot of effort from a lot of committee members, of which I'm very thankful.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
June. Yeah, it was
July.
June. We had a bet on how this was, I don't even remember what we bet on.
Do you want to
I think
maybe
it was lunch.
just quickly touch on the secret review?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is a type 1 action under secret. Type 1 action means it's more likely to, require full environmental review. So I did a long form environmental assessment form. The reason it's a type 1 action is because it's a zoning change affecting more than 25 acres. So I went through it, and the part 1, you'll see a bunch of blanks, and that's because if it's a zoning change, you skip D, E, whatever. So that's just all pretty much contact information and the description of the project in the beginning. And then the identification of the impacts is in the part 2. And because there's no construction going on, just the answer to almost everything was no. There was no impact on land, no impact on geological features, no impact on surface water, groundwater, flooding, air, plants and animals, agricultural resources, aesthetic resources, because there can't be any change to the house. The question on impact on historic and archaeological resources, the reason you have to answer yes is it says that the proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historic or archaeological resource, and there are some historic resources in the village. But if there's not, so then I check the box, no impact may occur. So, and then no impact on open space. And again, it had to be checked for critical environmental areas because we're in the Hudson River corridor, but then again, no impact can occur. Then no impact on transportation, energy, noise, odor, and light, human health, as or inconsistency with
human health. Get a caregiver.
So anyway, so I think you can safely say there won't be any negative environmental impacts, and that's included in the resolution.
Okay. Thank you for, it's a lot of pages with a lot of no's.
The impact is on the number of trees you had to cut down to
Yeah, exactly.
publish the seeker.
It is pretty thick.
Do you guys, do they have?
Any other comments on this, or I think we're ready to vote?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Whereas the Board of Trustees wishes to provide an opportunity for family members who choose to live in close proximity, but separate from other family members, to remain within the family environment and provide for the health and security concerns of elder or disabled residents who wish to remain in their homes, and protect residential stability, property values, and single-family character of neighborhoods, and make it possible for the village to supervise and monitor such apartments for code compliance and safety. Now therefore be it resolved to make a finding under the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act that the proposed local law will have no adverse impacts on the environment, and therefore issue a negative declaration, and further resolve to adopt a local law amending the zoning code to permit in-law apartments and one-family dwellings as an accessory use. Before we vote, I'm first going to make a motion to close the public hearing. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? And would someone like to make a motion to,
So moved.
a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, we got 1 out of 3 done. It's a good law.
Please tell the other committee members we appreciate all their input over the many months and effort this takes.
We look forward to the next suggestion.
What's next, right?
Yeah.
Love seeing you guys come.
All right, thank you.
And now for some of the controversial stuff, like volunteer appointments.
Oh, yeah.
Resolve to appoint Mark Barachin, there's actually an N, as a member of the Irvington Woods Committee for a term to expire December 2016. Resolve to appoint Michelle Baltoft as a member of the Green Policy Task Force for a term to expire December 2016. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you both for your service. Next, approval and removal of volunteer firemen. Resolved to approve the following new probationary member of the Irvington Fire Company, Thomas Napkin. Resolved to remove Christian Malata as a member of the Irvington Fire Company. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Larry, would you like to tell us what the award of contract for lighting technology upgrade is all about?
Sure. So we are setting about to upgrade the interior lighting of our village facilities to LED. And this contract does that. It's a local contractor, as you saw, as a low bidder. It also includes, the alternate is actually for the library. The library was not included in the base bid. And we simply have a few different provisions that apply to the library, because there are some sensitivities to how the lighting is going to be installed and how it needs to be tested, and rather than, frankly, rather than engage an engineer or come up with some sort of detailed specifications and light study, we decided to basically do field tests of various lighting in the library, and when everyone settles on it, then it'll be installed as such. So it's a little different way of doing things.
Field test in the library?
Yeah.
Is it impacts outside?
No, inside. It's all interior lighting.
Yeah, so. Okay.
No, but there's some sensitivity
You mean
to
ergometric type of sensitivity?
Yeah, exactly.
Too white to read or too bright to whatever, yeah, okay.
Right, and there's also different types of fixtures there, so it's a little bit more,
It's a Tiffany.
no. The round cylinder ones, there's a whole bunch of different styles that they have that are going to be looked at a little differently. So.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have one. I mean, this is implying, will it be sort of like automatic light controls and that kind of stuff, or is it purely a one-for-one conversion? It's not going to be like the room is empty for an hour, so it turns off the light or anything like that?
Right, correct. This is only for the lighting itself.
Yeah.
There still can be a series of upgrades that could be for the automatic shuttles.
Okay, so that would be a separate, yeah. Okay, because, in some of the buildings, it obviously makes sense to have that, or,
Yeah.
the bathroom facilities, whatever, some places it makes sense. My only concern was, and I'm sure you've thought about it, but, the gap between the low bid and even the next bid, I mean, it's almost 2x.
Yeah.
To me, that would be a red flag. So I'm wondering what you did to get over that concern.
Morbido is a local contractor that we work with pretty extensively. We have two local contractors. One didn't bid, the other did. But I think our feeling is they're comfortable with the level of with what they're getting into. They know the buildings. They know there's a whole variety of things that they feel comfortable about, as far as we can tell.
I mean, we have another local bid, number 5, which is kind of surprising. That is a local business, but it's like over the top in terms of the bid.
We don't work with that contractor typically. Not that it matters, but we haven't typically.
Yeah.
That contractor, Consolidated Electric, they happen to just win the fire alarm bid. You probably remember you just awarded. That's the first time we've worked with them.
But anyways, you understand my concern. Because you
I asked the
normally
same
would-
exact question.
We'll be going through in great detail with the contractor as to the work that needs to be done. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully there are no red flags, but at this stage, they're comfortable with the number they submitted.
I mean, is there going to be some, I hate to look at the negative side, but will there be some kind of performance criteria and stuff in the contract? I mean, I assume there must be.
Everything's specified.
In terms of,
All the replacement fixtures are specified.
I'm thinking more or less like time frame of.
60 days,
Oh, so it's all,
I think. Well, now I can't remember.
whatever, 69, but it's buttoned
Now I
up,
don't remember.
is what you're saying.
I'll have to look.
I don't need an exact date, just the sense that there is a closure to it that they have to conform to. Yeah. And what happens to all the leftover, I mean, are they, okay, last question, I'm sorry, and someone else can take over for me if there is any. Do the fixtures have to change, or are they really effectively one-for-one, screw replacement type of things?
It depends. Some are able to be just straight replacements, and some have to be retrofit.
Right.
And all that's.
And then they'll do all the proper recycling of all the junk, or does the village take over the recycling of the old,
I'd have to look, I'm not sure.
yeah.
Anyone else, questions? Whereas sealed bids were received and opened on July 13, 2016, 11 a.m. in Village Hall as follows. Morbido Electric of Sleepy Hollow, a total amount of $62,636.36, including the alternate 1 add-on. Rockland Electric from Manuet, New York, $110,600. Quality Conservation Services, Inc. from Oak Ridge, New Jersey, $111,228.16. Tri-State Electric from New Rochelle, New York, $139,100. Consolidated Hudson Electric Corp. from Irvington, New York for $147,951. Whereas the village administrator reviewed the bid submitted and determined that the bid from Morabito Electric, Inc. is in order and responsive to the specifications, now therefore be it resolved to award contract 2016-15 for the lighting technology upgrade project in the amount of $62,636.36, which is the base bid plus add alternate number 1, and to authorize the village administrator to execute said contract. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Authorization for Hudson River Valley Greenway grant.
Very straightforward. This is the $10,000 grant that was recently awarded for the purchase and installation of benches along Main Street. And this agreement covers that.
Says we'll take the money.
Yes.
Basically, we're authorizing you to take money.
We're also matching a certain amount of money,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because I saw the breakdown, so,
Yeah, 7,000.
because I was wondering at first, when I first saw the number from the Greenway, it was like, how are we gonna get that number of benches?
Right.
Just for my clarification's sake, these are the wooden and metal benches, right?
It's the World's Fair bench. There's one out in front of it.
That's the wooden slats and the
Yeah,
metal.
yeah. Same one in Scenic Hudson.
Okay, I
The
just
one
want to
in the
make sure
plan.
that,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Anything else? Resolved to authorize the village administrator to execute a memorandum of understanding with the Hudson River Valley Greenway for a grant to fund the purchase of benches on Main Street. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move. I'll make this motion, yes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Benches, yay.
Benches. Everyone can rest. Bond resolutions to implement the capital budget. So here we are, we approved the capital budget, and now we're going to approve funding for the capital budget. Broken into 5 different buckets, Larry: 5-year usable life, 10-year,
Yes.
15, 20, and 40. Anything changed from the capital budget?
No, we wouldn't do that, Dave.
Yeah, okay. It's tripled.
Yeah, no, it's not, there's nothing buried in there.
It's on the record now.
We're a little more honorable than that.
All right. I figure I'll read the entire thing for you.
You missed Pokemon.
Bond resolution dated July 20th, 2016, authorizing the issuance up to $88,200 aggregate principal amount serial bonds of the Village of Irvington, County of Westchester, State of New York, pursuant to the local finance law to finance the cost of 1, the acquisition of motor vehicles, and 2, the planning for future capital improvement for the village. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Don't fall asleep on me now. Bond resolution dated July 20th, 2016, authorizing the issuance of up to $603,200 in aggregate principal amount serial bonds of the Village of Irvington, County of Westchester, State of New York, pursuant to the local finance law to finance the cost of 1, the acquisition of computer equipment, 2, the acquisition and installation of a village security system, all in and for the village, the acquisition, construction, and reconstruction of improvements to the village waterways, and 4, the acquisition, construction, and reconstruction of improvements to village buildings, and all in and for the village. I will make the motion. Can I have a second?
What, does you give the yearly duration?
I can. This is the 10-year.
This is 10-year, I wish you would on, just for the record.
Sure. That first one was the 5-year. This is the 10-year.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Oh, we have to vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I hope I'm not falling asleep on this now. This is the 15-year probable usefulness. Bond resolution dated July 20th, 2016, authorizing the issuance of up to $561,000 aggregate principal amount serial bonds of the Village of Irvington, County of Westchester, State of New York, pursuant to the local finance law to finance the cost of 1, the construction and reconstruction of road improvements, and 2, the acquisition of machinery and apparatus for the construction and maintenance, all in and for the village. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
20-year probable usefulness. Bond resolution dated July 20th, 2016, authorizing the issuance of up to $61,200 aggregate principal amount serial bonds of the Village of Irvington, County of Westchester, State of New York, pursuant to the local finance law to finance the cost of the acquisition of water meters in the village. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? All in favor? Aye. 40-year useful life. Bond resolution dated July 20th, 2016, authorizing the issuance up to $183,600 aggregate principal amount serial bonds of the Village of Irvington, County of Westchester, State of New York, pursuant to the local finance law to finance the cost of the acquisition, construction, and reconstruction of improvements to the village water system. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Last years.
Endorsement of a grant application for the study of a Route 9 corridor.
So, there's a consortium of communities that has formed over the last several months from Hastings to Sleepy Hollow, and the consortium has been pushing for the study of Route 9 and ways Route 9 can become more pedestrian and bike friendly, and also ways that it could connect to the new New York Bridge pedestrian path. And so this consortium, largely prior to Irvington's involvement, submitted a letter of intent, a letter of interest to the new New York Bridge Community Benefits Program, which is a grant program run by the Thruway Authority. The letter of intent was received well, and the request was for a $150,000 grant to hire a consultant to do such a study. And as I said, the letter of intent was received well, and the consortium was invited to submit an application. That's the way the process goes with this particular grant program. So this consortium will be developing a grant application over the next month and a half or so. We'll be working with a grant writer for a very small fee. It's not an extensive grant application. And so this is requesting your endorsement of that grant submission, which I think you would agree. And then we will also be establishing a three-person from Irvington steering committee. There'll be 3 people from each of the communities for a total of 15. And we'll have names for that shortly. So far, we've identified Walter Montgomery and
What a surprise.
and Mark Gilliland. We're working on a third. So anyway, that's jumping ahead a little bit. That steering committee will help out a little bit with reviewing the grant application itself. But if awarded, the steering committee's main role is to work with the consultant and to steer the whole planning study and whatnot.
So this could couple, given twisting arms and everything else, could couple with the whole notion of looking at Broadway and its lane configurations and stuff like that, because it would underline that would be what you would need to do to get safer bike and so forth, right?
I think in many locations, one of the only things you can do is to reduce the number of lanes to gain some real estate, because there's not extra real estate.
Right.
To just put bike paths and, and maybe another sidewalk on the other side. This just doesn't exist. So certainly that's going to be part of it, I would assume.
So that's all good.
I think so.
Anything else? No. What's this? Resolved that the Village of Irvington recognizes that such bike pedestrian enhancements positively impact the quality of life of its residents and commercial vibrancy of its community. Irvington supports and endorses said application and authorizes its submission as part of the River Towns. Irvington shall actively support the implementation of the project should the application be successful. I will make the motion. Can I get a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Reports of boards, standing committees, and officers. Trustee liaison reports. Mr. Gilliland.
I don't think I have anything I can deal with right now, except to say thank you to the DPW. We're getting some real action on some of the traffic committee stuff. Some more banners are up, and I think some other things are going on. And just in that reference, Larry, I don't know, but the speed sign on Harriman is dark now.
Yes, I know.
Is it out of batteries? Or?
I believe it's out of battery, and the person that can replace that is out for a few days, so it may be dark for a couple of days.
Oh, I'm not complaining, I'm just
No,
bringing it to
I'm
you.
aware of it.
Yeah, okay, good. And, I mean, I give my normal comment just to close out that the Environmental Conservation Board and the Tree Commission are looking for additional volunteers.
Nothing.
I like it.
I got nothing.
Wow, this is a record.
It's really short. The Highway Department is doing a lot of repairing and replacing and installing slow-down Irvington banners at various locations, and the radar speed limit sign on the north side of Harriman Road, which is not working, but they are. Water Department similarly has been summer maintenance, reading water meters, replacing what needs to be replaced.
That's it.
So you guys, next in order is the village administrator's report.
So just a heads up that there's a fairly large project that will be undertaking in Hudson View Park, Hudson Road and Hudson Avenue and Center Street. The project is a drainage and curb project. Some of the drainage work was scheduled actually a few years forward, but it's deteriorated significantly, and there's a $50,000 grant that we're using from the New York State Department of Transportation that you probably approved the grant agreement some months ago. That's for the replacement of curbs, and many of the curbs are located in areas where there's also drainage underneath, so we're taking advantage of the opportunity to have some efficiency in our construction and replace curbs and drainage in various locations. So there's actually a big placard that's been installed, placed at the entrance to Hudson View Park, so residents are aware that it's a big project. They may be inconvenienced in terms of having to wait for some construction, but local traffic is of course permitted, and just asking people for patience. But I think the residents up there will see the benefits of this much more than being delayed a few minutes. So just so you're aware. It's probably about a 3-week project.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask.
Could be longer, in that range.
Village attorney's report.
I don't have a report, but I would like to meet with you for maybe 10 minutes after the meeting.
Assuming the public comments don't run too late. There are no public present, so there'll be no public comment.
So could we just re-announce Pokemon Go
Pokemon.
in
You
the
have
park?
45 minutes to download the app. Review of current action items. I didn't, anyone have anything today?
The only thing that came from the discussion on the appearance tickets was to generate a list of enforcement responsibilities from department heads, but then there was some follow-up discussion about how exactly that's going to go. But I think we will, the departments will provide you with the information you asked for. What you do with it is up to you. So how you process it is up to you. But that's on the list.
I will make a motion to adjourn if I can get a second. All in favor? Opposed? Carries.